I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show and today's weekend's Best Of special. I was out in Los Angeles this week having fun at the premiere of Mr. Birchum, which is an animated series that's going to air on the Daily Wire Plus, in which Adam Carolla stars along with yours truly, Roseanne, and some other very talented people. We had some of the stars on the show, including Adam, Kyle Dunnigan. So funny. If you missed Kyle Dunnigan, please, I'm begging you to watch this. You will thank me, okay? If you don't want to thank me, you will write me a note. You can email me at Megyn@MegynKelly.com, and you can tell me I was wrong, but you won't. You won't. You're going to love it. All right? Plus, Vivek Ramaswamy joined me this week to talk about the state of the media and the vibe of authority of the losers on MSNBC. That was a great exchange. You'll see some highlights. Victor Davis Hanson, brilliant. He was brilliant talking about the hate that we're seeing on college campuses today. And then there was Buck Sexton, who, man, you thought I was into the Kristi Noem story, or you were? No. Buck Sexton made us look like we were bored by it all. He really dove into the whole insane week that she had before she was forced to cancel her book tour due to weather. Okay, Kristi, enjoy, and talk to you Monday. Here's a little example of how they reacted. You're going to be shocked. Watch it.
And the judge threatening the ex-president with jail time.
It is really clear that the judge is, depending on the seriousness of the next violation, contemplating putting him in jail. I mean, and frankly, if that happens, it's not going to be because of anything Judge Merchan did. It's going to be Donald Trump's own choice.
I know from my own reporting, I'm sure you do too, that Trump didn't eat on foreign trips because he was so afraid of germs. There's no way Trump himself wants to go to jail.
And certainly not many black defendants who, if they came this close to the line, would have already been held in contempt of court and would have been incarcerated by now. I mean, so he is getting the dewest of process. And
the idea that Donald Trump actually would want to go to jail is ridiculous. Anyone who knows him knows that. He doesn't even like to stay in a hotel.
He won't eat food when he goes on foreign territory.
Right.
You have to use the bathroom. His hair, his makeup, his skin, like he will be pulled apart. He doesn't have the metal to do it. So Donald Trump is terrified. You've got to believe, just by his issues with odors and smells and fear of disease.
He threw down the gauntlet. If he doesn't throw Trump in jail, he would look entirely like a paper tiger. And Trump got that message.
How much bravado. This is not somebody who's thinking, and I'm going to have a really great time at Rikers.
Can I just make this the point in the program when we say none of this is normal?
Oh, my God. Honestly, Nicole Wallace is the worst. She's the worst. Well, she barely moves her lips when she's speaking. She barely has, it's just like a little hole that words come out of. I can't quite get it. It's like I said yesterday. And she's so sanctimonious, Vivek. She can't, right. She doesn't know anything. She knows nothing about what Trump's habits are when he travels overseas. None of them does, but they want to pretend like they're in the room with him, in the bedroom, in the bathroom, in the dining room with Trump, and they can tell you exactly how he's going to respond if he gets a day in jail.
Well, look, she knows nothing about Donald Trump's habits. She probably knows even less about the law or an understanding or a care about that as well. Right. And I think that manner of speech is really funny. I don't, like to pick on these minor details, but you actually hit the nail on the head there. It's all part of this air of sanctimony, right? The air, the vibe of authority without actually having any of the content of that authority. And I think that's what so many in the modern media have actually become, is the air, the genteel sort of atmospherics of having authority and the manner that you speak, the sanctimony that drips from it, but without having the first basis of an understanding of how the law or the Constitution works. And so it's completely backwards versus somebody who actually didn't speak with the right mannerism, but actually knew what they were talking about. That would be far preferable to me. Now, the schadenfreude, the level of rejoicing in somebody else's suffering, I've never seen something like this, but we know that's exactly what we're to expect here from the media. They've been playing for this for a long time. The entire plot has been to really portray Donald Trump as a criminal. That's been, I think, a big part of the Democratic Party's goal in this objectionable pursuit of prosecutions against him. So it's no surprise that the media has played interference for them on so many other topics, is going to run interference here as well. I think that's the less interesting part than to examine what is exactly the consequence here. Let's say Donald Trump is, God forbid, I think it'd be bad for the country, but thrown in jail. I do think that they've kind of put themselves in a box here because Donald Trump believes, I believe correctly, that this is an affront to the Constitution. He has a right to speak in the middle of an election. He's running to lead this country to be the commander in chief. So for him to buckle at behest of what this judge, who has no regard for the law or the Constitution on this set of issues, I think would be a bad outcome. So I think Donald Trump should continue to express his opinions because he's running for U.S. president, and both he and the country deserve to hear his opinions on a matter of public importance. But the judge has now put himself in a box, going out of his way. He didn't have to do this, but going out of his way to be able to threaten jail time. I think that is something that unfortunately sets this up as a reasonably likely outcome. And you know what? Donald Trump's made a lot of sacrifices for the country, running for president, serving as U.S. president. This wouldn't be the biggest of them. And so I think it would set a terrible precedent. I think it's going to be bad for the country. But I think it is reasonably likely that it does end up there. And as sad as that is, it's exactly what you would predict. Once you've opened Pandora's box with these prosecutions based on really no figment of a legal theory to back it up against a former president and a man running for U.S. president in the middle of an election, this is just the necessary consequence and all the drama that follows. It's unfortunately what they signed up for in the first place. And I think that this is just the tip of the iceberg of what we're going to see in the next 6 months.
They're thrilled about it because they want his humiliation. That's what you heard them talking about, well, how, he's not going to be able to have his hair the way he wants it. They want his humiliation. That's why they were so angry that he leaned into his mugshot and it went on the mugs and it went on T-shirts. And so they're waiting for him to be humbled, to be humiliated. And they keep waiting for the next chapter. Maybe Judge Merchan will get him there when he throws him behind jail bars, and we can watch that and revel. The media, of course, has been a massive problem. You experienced it when you were running and before and after. This is a small ball story, but it's indicative. There was a reporter for NBC News, then she moved on to CNN. Her name is Michelle Kaczynski, and she posted a thread on X last night. She was very well known at both of those outlets. A thread on X last night revealing her horror at a dinner she recently had with people who turned out to be MAGA. At first, she said, they seemed great on the surface for like an hour. And then, she says, the closeted guests over a few drinks began to slip their true MAGA natures. And she says, she marvels at how a, quote, normal group of people could support a politician like Trump, of whom she does not approve, going here from the Daily Mail report. One of the couples attended top Ivy League colleges, she writes, but now that it was university time for their own children, they were adamantly not letting them apply to any Ivies and were weird about explaining why, though the kids were double legacies. Okay, moving on. She criticizes their position on, quote, climate change and the fact that they use that term in air quotes, not scientists, clearly, and goes on from there. Now, Vivek, this is a woman who I've been around in the media long enough to remember, left NBC, was pushed out, I believe, shortly after the following incident, which went everywhere. She was doing a report on flooding after a hurricane in some American town, and she did the report from a canoe as though she was stranded. This is the only way to get around. And in the middle of her live shot, firefighters walked through the live shot with the water up to their ankles. We actually pulled the clip just to show you. I mean, this is the dishonest media in a snapshot. Watch this.
NBC's Michelle Kaczynski, I guess she's in the canoe, is in Wayne, New Jersey this morning.
Hey,
Michelle, good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, obviously we're getting a nice break from the rain, but not the flooding. This is essentially now a part of the Passaic River in this neighborhood.
Well, I'll take it. Is there some kind of severe drop-off there between the foreground? We'll go back. We saw these guys a second ago, Michelle, walking. Are these holy men walking on top of water? What's going on here?
Why walk when you can ride, you guys? When you have a ride like this, why would you want to walk?
Is your oar hitting ground, Michelle?
Of course not.
That was the end of her career. That's my opinion. At NBC, she was gone shortly there. Now she wants to lecture us all on how evil MAGA is and her horror at being exposed to the closeted Republicans and their views on the Ivies and climate change and so on. What do you make of it?
The people at that dinner party remind me probably likely of the firemen who were just walking right past her, people who actually probably had something more worthy to do, that were actually there for a purpose, had little regard for her presence there or whatever antics she was taking on. And, that probably looks like a woman who's been doing this her entire career. So it seems like the same pattern continues. And this is a big part of the reason there's a lot of things I'm looking at doing with my time, but relaunching a podcast, why am I going to take the time to do that is this gives me a motivation to exactly engage in the kind of conversations that American people are hungry for, regardless of what the mainstream media is stuffing down their throats. And I think it just typifies how the whole thing has actually become a charade. It's not just a sort of form of lying, Megyn. I think mainstream media has lied about a whole range of topics, and I've talked about this extensively during the race. You've talked about it extensively for the last 10 years. Nonetheless, I think it's not just the lie, it's the pageantry around the lie that I think is actually far more bothersome. It's a production. It's almost like it's not just a lie. A lie is anymore pretending to be you're in the interest of objective news, but you're telling somebody false information. I think it's become closer to like a Broadway production in the same way that she's putting on a show. She recognizes, and they're even talking about it on air, why would you walk when you could instead be pretending to row? That's effectively what they're doing in the totality of their other reporting too, is she could just be talking about the actual disagreements, the policy disagreements that she has between Republicans who are in that same room. And there's such a more interesting direction to go. It's like the equivalent of if she had just been reporting and interviewing those firemen. But instead, what they're actually creating is an alternative production that, I think historically that business, maybe they think they're entertaining their audience, but it isn't even entertaining anymore. And I think that once you see that, you get closer to the flame of what's going on. It's not just they're spewing falsehood. It's like the equivalent of putting on a theatrical production, and one that, like most theatrical productions, is failing. And I think that that's why it's going to come to an end very soon.
You've set up my next clip perfectly, which is of Lawrence O'Donnell, speaking of NBC. This is him on MSNBC, freaking out about the fact that yesterday at Trump's trial, what they spent most of the day doing was documenting the payments that were ultimately made to Stormy Daniels and the receipts of how that was done. Of course, no one's denying that the payment was made, but they need to get that in front of the jury. It was not an exciting day in court, but it was to Lawrence O'Donnell. Watch.
They wrote it down. The conspiracy was written out on paper. That is rare in criminal prosecutions. Prosecutors are usually left explaining to juries that, criminal conspirators don't write it all down, but that is what they did in the Trump office on Fifth Avenue and in the White House. Today, Donald Trump's jury was shown the handwritten conspiracy. Donald Trump's financial mastermind, convicted felon Alan Weisselberg, put the conspiracy in his handwriting on Michael Cohen's bank statement. And then another financial officer in the Trump shop put the whole thing in his handwriting on Trump Company stationery. Final handwriting in the conspiracy presented to the jury today were Donald Trump's signatures.
Oh my gosh. He had a breaking news chyron up the entire time. Breaking news. No one's trying to hide it, right? We understood that these payments were made. This was a perfunctory day in court. This was not the apex of the prosecution's case, but the media can't get enough of it, Vivek. It's like crack to them.
That's right. I mean, it's an addiction. You'd say breaking news. He's like breaking the news, like breaking the existence of actually distinguishing what is important to report to the public versus not. And it just bothers the heck out of me. He has no clue when he's describing this to his audience base as they wrote down the conspiracy. Just if you had any first idea of the backdrop of what this case was about, like let's just say you had the first clue about this case, this allegation of falsifying business records, right, which is the first and state-based, the New York-based charge that Alvin Bragg is bringing. A, that's outside the statute of limitations, but B, at most, even if that alleged conspiracy, I think a lot of that is actually also false and mischaracterized, but at most, that would be charged and could only be charged under the law as a misdemeanor, unless you make up all of this other nonsense about this being a constructive campaign contribution that wasn't recorded as a campaign contribution, which, as we talked about before, rests on a completely flawed legal theory on its own, and is completely misleading their audience of creating, again, that atmosphere. It's all about atmosphere. It's all about vibe of pretending like this is some sort of devious conspiracy. And you put up images of different handwritten documents, the audience doesn't know what to make of it. And the whole point isn't that their audience is too stupid to follow. It's the fact that these people who are reporting to them are actually too stupid to report on it, but have just created this atmosphere, this vibe, the equivalent of that other woman with her theatrical production rowing across that river when, in fact, somebody could have just walked straight across it as we saw in real time. That's the equivalent of what they're doing with their portrayal of these documents. When, in fact, the average viewer, what you need is actually somebody explaining to them what's actually going on. It's the equivalent of those firefighters walking straight across, and that's what's missing in most of the media today. But, we can't just sit here and complain about what they're doing. They're in the dying business. And, what we need is more alternatives to people to be able to explain to ordinary Americans, hey, here's what's actually going on. And more people are hungry to seek that information out for themselves. They've been lied to systematically for the last 10 years. Most people understand the basic premise that, you know what, you fool me once, shame on me, and fool me twice, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And I think that people are hungry for checking what they're hearing through MSNBC or through NBC News or CNN. And I think that's a good thing. And so this is part of, I take it to be a growing up of our culture. We, I think, in the last 10 years, grown up, Megyn. I think that's why we're seeing the decline and the influence of histrionics like this from MSNBC. And, I take that as a mark of progress. It's a good thing.
Columbia students right now, law students, pushing to cancel all exams. Student editors at the Columbia Law Review are urging the law school to cancel tests or at least make all courses pass-fail. Highlights from their statement. We urge the law school to cancel exams and give all students passing grades. The violence we witnessed last night has irrevocably shaken many of us, left us and many of our peers unable to focus and highly emotional during this tumultuous time. I've got news for you. The law is not for you. Pick a different profession. Maybe like gardening. It can be mildly frustrating, but in general, stress-free. You should not be lawyers. If you cannot function or focus because you're too highly emotional after some protests, you're going to be dealing with murderers and child molesters if you do criminal law, fraudsters who have completely bankrupted people if you go into the more white collar. If you want to do civil litigation like I did, you could be talking about people who are dead in a product's liability case. You could be talking about 30,000 people losing their job if you fail to argue this motion successfully. If you cannot function because you're a little stressed out, you're going to be a shitty lawyer. Find a different job. It's not about canceling your exam. They go on to say, this follows the growing distress that many of us have felt for months. Our students are not well. On that, I agree with them. Victor, this is so pathetic.
Yeah, one thing that I don't like it, but we have got moral clarity about all these demonstrations. They have just blown up a lot of the left's charades. We've known, anybody who's been at a so-called elite campus has known for years that they're mediocre. At Stanford, where I work, they let in only 20% of the student body is so-called white. That's not important, but it is important that they threw out the SAT and they don't rate comparative GPAs to achieve that. And so they are letting in students who, by their own definition, cannot do the work that they themselves used to require because they were in competition with other universities and said, we're preeminent. Now, what are they doing? They're giving 60 to 80% A's at all these campuses. They're watering down the courses at half the workload, or they're introducing new courses. And then they're creating these helicopter-privileged, helicopter-parented students, and everybody's watching us. And they're thinking, wow, these kids tore up the Portland State Library. They were like animals. They destroyed it. Wow, did you see what they did at USC and UCLA? They made a mess. It's worse than a homeless camp. And then you know who has to clean it up? All these poor maintenance people. And they roughed up a janitor at Columbia. Right. And there's all these poor middle-class policemen that they spit in. And then there's Byron Donalds come here, and they call him Uncle Tom and a traitor, this Middle Eastern students, and they shout, go back to Poland or the final solution. We don't like these people. They're spoiled. I think the Americans are concluding that. They're spoiled. We don't like these administrators and presidents that won't stop it, and they're scared. And we understand why it continues, because the faculty, the president, the blue state city council, the blue city mayor, the blue state governor, they all agree with the agendas of these left-wing students. And that's been really a lot of moral clarity. A lot of it is, we always were told, you can be against Israel, but you're not anti-Semitic. They're showing you that they're one and the same. Every time they try to rough up a Jewish kid or chase him into the library, they never say, "Wait, before we do this, you look Jewish to us. Could I ask you if you support Israel or not?" They don't. And the same thing about, well, we're for Palestine, but we're not for terrorists like Hamas. They are. They're the same. Their flags are there. They have Hezbollah banners. And another myth that they blew up is, the Democratic Party has this base, the kind of crazy base, transgendered issues, open borders, the Squad, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, the Black Caucus. But this is not they're one and the same. Joe Biden cannot open his mouth about any of this without saying Islamophobia. He cannot just say this is an anti-Semitic. This is what the Democratic Party is in toto. And Joe Biden, to the degree he knows he's there, the people around him, his wife and the Obama advisors, this party now is completely Jacobin left wing. And there is no base. And then maybe there's a Fetterman or two, but that's it. And that party is committed to open borders. They're committed to these demonstrations. They are anti-Semitic. They do not like Israel. They rejuvenated Iran by design. And that's who they are. And I think American people are seeing that today. And the longer this goes on, it's going to hurt them.
The exchange between the protesters at SUNY New Paltz and the head of the school there, it was infuriating. It reminded me of what happened at Evergreen in Washington State. I remember that. Smugness of these protesters, as though they hold all the cards, and the capitulation of the head of school, who was coming at it from the same angle. Like, he has no negotiating power, and they're completely in charge. It, again, makes my skin crawl. Here it is a bit in SOT 3.
This isn't ending until our demands are met.
We don't control the contract pieces the way you laid it out.
But it's our money. We are giving you this money, and so we are paying your bills. We are paying your paychecks. It is your responsibility, President Wheeler. It is your responsibility to figure it out.
What I would like to do is to be able to work with you to bring your concerns to the places where they can make an impact.
And you can come here
okay.
and come back with what they say.
Mm-hmm.
There's a card with the demands on it. Mm-hmm. You can take it to your people.
I hear what you're saying, and I also have to say that I would rather that this not escalate the way other campuses, because you all have done a phenomenal job.
That's up to you. That is your responsibility.
That escalation will come from the police.
Good. I hope that gentleman he likes this, because he's going to get a whole lot more of it. And so too will Northwestern, Rutgers, University of Minnesota, all of whom have caved to the demands of the protesters. They're all on bended knee, begging for these students to forgive them for being so awful in their alleged support of Israel. They're creating things like an Arab Culture Center at Rutgers, a Department of Palestinian Studies, and on it goes. They're not fighting them. They're like, you know what? You're right about everything. Take over our campus, and here's our new Arab Center.
Yeah, and all he had to say was, I want to remind you, it's not your money. You pay tuition, which is a fraction of our expenses. Here's where the money goes and comes from. It comes from the taxpayer. They give us tax-free income on our endowments. They subsidize your student loans to this tune of $1.7 trillion. They give us massive federal grants. The endowment, such as it is at these schools, comes from alumni who give money. That was their money. And without it, you wouldn't be here. You are subsidized in every aspect. You think it's expensive? it would be twice as expensive. And he could easily say that. All I have to do is, I think, we're just looking for one person who says, Ben Sasse was really good when he said, no, we're not going to do that at the University of Florida. And they would fold. You just have to say, we saw that with the Arizona State Union young woman who was kicked out. And she broke into tears and sobbed, I can't believe this is happening to me. This generation is they're hothouse plants, and they need to be exposed to the real weather. And I think it's, I know this sounds crazy, but I really do believe, after being on the Stanford campus and watching Harvard and Yale and Princeton and Columbia, they are going the way of Bud Light, CNN, Target, and Disney. They don't know it because you can't stand out and say, but a lot of people are not going to send their kids there. And they're going to lower their standards to get more people to come in, because the top students will not go there. Employers will say, if I hire that graduate, they won't know how to analyze. They won't be skilled in composition or oral fluency. They won't be mathematically competent, but they will go to human resources the day they get here.
Yeah.
And I don't want those people in my company. And I think that's going to happen.
That's right. It's amazing as you watch these students. Every time we see one speak up, like in that last video, it's very clear there's somebody who's very gender confused leading the charge there. I don't know what it was, is a he or a she or what they go by. But Joseph Massey, our favorite poet, he was calling them Osama non-binary. And that's exactly right when you look at these videos. Osama non-binary would really want us to offer more support for Hamas. And we're listening. These university presidents are listening. We've got to talk about what's happening at the University of Chicago and the demands, not only for goggles and alleged gauze to bind their wounds, but HIV tests, Plan B.
She's been pretending to be ultra conservative in a very red state. And what she does is, the moment she's challenged on something, she runs the same routine, the same playbook that she always has in the past. And for example, on the transgender bill, she tweeted that she was going to do it. And then she just created this whole nonsense about how, well, no, actually, I never said. Well, it's in writing. You clearly said it. But she exploits, I think, a sense of identity and a sense of people feeling like they have a connection to her because of her personal story or whatever it might be. And then she always goes on offense. And so she essentially, there's like a little mini Noem cult. And the moment that you call her to account, she all of a sudden gets angry at you, and she doesn't take accountability for it. And this was, by the way, on COVID. She also decided not to protect people from vaccine mandates, private ones, in her state. Ron DeSantis made a different choice, but she got very upset.
That's one of the things that you guys fought over. Had to dust up, whatever. Here's a little bit of that from 2021.
When I'm not governor anymore, how do I know the next governor won't use that exact same precedent to use it to limit the freedom?
But you are the governor now, Governor Noem, and right now we're at a point where there are mandates going. People are having to get shots right now. People are facing losing their jobs right now. Well, why not be a person who is taking a stand in favor of individual freedom, which I believe is actually the primary purpose of the Constitution? Why not do that?
And there is nobody in this country that would say that no other governor took more heat over defending liberty and freedom than I did this last year.
I think Governor Ron DeSantis might disagree, but keep going.
Keep going. You keep going, Buck.
Oh, it's just so obvious. And the truth is that she always points to not shutting down her state during COVID. But I haven't even gotten to the dog shooting, the bragging about the dog shooting.
We're going there. And we have the audio. We have the audio.
Shooting on top of the dog shooting, and then making a joke about how she wants to shoot the president's existing dog.
Yep.
This is sociopathic. Sorry, I don't want to jump around too much.
No, she's like a serial killer.
Well, on COVID, I sniffed this out because she was playing this whole game, and I saw what she did to Tucker on TV, and I've seen what she's tried with other people, which is everyone else is dumb but her. When you're speaking to some of the smartest minds in media, and you're speaking to people that have been in this game a while, and your response is always, you just don't know enough, sir. This is how we do it on the ranch or whatever. you're the problem. And that's been the case with Kristi Noem for a long time. Her aggressive strategy, the little cult she's built around her. And people, this is what I wanted to get to before. Anyone who's known my work for a long time, I mentioned I used to go on your show. I don't attack people on the right. I generally have no enemies to the right. I don't pick fights with people. I love the success of fellow radio hosts. I mean, I applaud the Daily Wire doing cool stuff. I love Dan Bongino fighting for America. Like, I'm on the team. But when I see somebody who's being a fraud and taking advantage of people on my side who are well-intentioned and who will want freedom and who want effective and competent leadership, it does bother me, when they're being lied to in a way that I think affects them. So that's where the original thing with Noem came up. And now, yeah, I mean, I was right. I was right all along, and I'm right now. And some of the people that have emailed me, years ago, why are you being so hard on her? I was like, because she's a phony. And now everyone knows she's actually kind of worse than a phony.
She's a phony. She's a poser. And she won't be honest about her own shortcomings, even when she's caught red-handed. That exchange with Jesse Waters, I don't have conversations about my conversations with world leaders. No one's asking you about substance. We're asking you, did you meet with him or didn't you? You're the one who brought it up, ma'am. You put it in your book. Did it happen or didn't it? And by the way, when you then claim when it was brought to who brought it to your attention? When? Why did you read the audiobook? When you read out loud, I met with Kim Jong-un and I stared him down. Did it occur to you that you were telling a lie? Because most of us would have a very clear memory if we had met with the leader of North Korea. It's kind of a big deal. Did you correct it then? Were you embarrassed? Did you go back through tooth and comb over your entire ghost-written memoir to make sure there were no other errors? Because you also appear to have lied about a meeting with Emmanuel Macron. How many lies are there in this book? And why should we believe you on anything, especially now your revisionist history about why you really shot your puppy, which she's now claiming the dog was basically a serial killer and not her?
It was a 14-month-old dog of a breed that I'm familiar with and have dealt with in the past. The notion that kind of a dog is a threat to people, she's lying. And for anyone who's like, well, why are we spending time on this? She was the #1 VP candidate according to the betting markets. And
That's right.
This is the kind of thing in a super tight election. What do I want? I want Donald Trump to win. I want Republican majorities in the House and the Senate. I do not want some abject fraud to be the difference between victory and defeat for the Republicans. How could I take any pride in my job if I would be silent when I truly believe, and as you pointed out, I've believed it for a long time, that this is somebody who is dishonest with her own supporters and is dishonest with the American people, and also brings a kind of nastiness. And I haven't even gotten into the personal stuff, and I won't because I don't think I need to go there. But
we've reported on it.
You have reported on it?
Yeah, the audience, we reported on this show, the Daily Mail's in-depth reporting about her alleged affair with Corey Lewandowski, and the denials of which were absolutely pathetic and transparent. And I believe 100% it happened. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I have excellent sourcing on this, and I absolutely agree with you. So I'll say that. I mean, I have a lot of people that I know in D.C. and in political circles, and we talk a lot. And guess what? But I'll put that aside because honestly, I don't want to be accused of being having a double standard because some male politicians obviously get away with a lot of stuff in that realm. But on the telling people the truth about what you stand for and where you'll actually fight and whether you're a person of any integrity whatsoever, Megyn, I mean, I can't help but laugh. She's saying she won't talk about meetings with world leaders based on a section of her book where she's talking about meetings with world leaders, and she thinks this is. She prepared this. She went on Jesse Waters' show, and Jesse was, Jesse's a very nice guy. Jesse,
too nice there.
Again, see, I don't want to attack people on the right. We have communists.
I'm not attacking Jesse. I've known Jesse a long time. I think he would take my feedback as Jesse. There's a different way to do it.
100%. I didn't mean it like that, but I'm just saying, even just, I don't want to call him out for being a little too softer in the interview, but I think he was, but it's okay. I really like Jesse. But the point is, she thought people are looking to her for an answer on this. She thinks that's a legitimate answer, and she's defiant about it. Notice there's no sense of remorse, whether it's the dog shooting story, which she included in the book. And people I love dogs, and I tell everybody that, so I'm very honest about where I'm coming from. She included that in her book because she thought it made her look like she makes tough decisions, so she should possibly lead America, not just as vice president, everybody. The whole game plan is vice president to president. And I'm sorry, like that to me is just a bridge way too far for a person who has no record of actual legislative achievement to be proud of and lies in a way that makes a mockery of all. It makes a mockery of all of us. Well, we're going to pull the lever and be like, yeah, I'm so excited about the Noem candidacy. Really?
Okay, so we finally have, because the book hit today, including the audio version, Kristi Noem, in her own words, describing the murder of the 14-month-old puppy Cricket. We've condensed it into a 2-minute clip. Here it is.
Cricket was a wire hair pointer, about 14 months old, and she had come to us from a home that had struggled with her aggressive personality. I was sure that she'd learn a lot going out with our older dogs that day. I was wrong. Within an hour of walking the first field, Cricket had blown past the group, gotten too far ahead. She'd flushed up birds that were out of range. She was out of her mind with excitement, chasing all those birds and having the time of her life. The only problem was there was no hunters nearby to shoot the birds that she was scaring up. I called her back to no avail. I hit her electronic collar to give her a quick tone to remind her to listen. I then hit the button to give her a warning vibration that told her to come back to me now. No response. The hunt was ruined, and I was livid. Some neighbors who recently purchased a puppy from us asked me to stop and to check on their pup on the way home. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of Cricket launching herself out of the back end of the pickup and racing across the yard. All three of us chased Cricket around in circles, flailing after her while she systematically grabbed one chicken at a time, crunching it to death with one bite, and then dropping it to attack another. She was like a trained assassin. Eventually, I got my hand on her collar and she whipped around to bite me. There were bloodied bodies and feathers everywhere. When I got back into my truck, Cricket was sitting in the passenger seat, looking like she had just won the lottery, the picture of pure joy. I hated that dog. As I drove home, I realized that I had no choice. Cricket was untrainable, and after trying to bite me, dangerous to anybody that she came in contact with. A dog who bites is dangerous and unpredictable. Are you listening, Joe Biden? She was less than worthless to us as a hunting dog. At that moment, I realized I had to put her down. As I pulled into the driveway, I decided I had to deal with this problem myself. This was my dog, and it was my responsibility. And I would not ask somebody else to clean up my mess. I stopped the truck in the middle of the yard. I got out my gun, grabbed Cricket's leash, and I led her out into the pasture and down into the gravel pit. It was not a pleasant job, but it had to be done.
There you have it, in her own words.
So a few things about this, and the people in your audience who are dog lovers, I have a ton of them in my audience. I think they know where I'm coming from. I'll try to get past the horror of thinking that this is some kind of a cool story to show that you'll make the tough decisions. To shoot your own as a 14-month-old dog. I want to analyze this as objectively as I can. Why is she including? And people say, oh, this doesn't matter. Really, this person wants to be president of the United States. I think it matters a lot, actually. But put that aside. And then also talking about how she shot the goat because she didn't like the goat and everything else.
It smelled bad.
The same day, by the way. And has photos of her the same day that she's put horses down. She takes photos of this to commemorate it. Like, does that seem normal? How many people listening to this have photos of them celebrating horse put down day when they shoot their horse? Okay. All right. So those are all facts. Those are not in dispute. She brings up all of the issues of it being bad at hunting. So are you killing? And she said she hated it before the incident where it tried to bite her. It sounds to me like she thinks the dog isn't worthwhile enough to her as a hunting dog, so she's going to kill it. I mean, that's the part, or at least she's moving in that direction.
Yes.
And then when she says the dog turned around to bite her, it didn't bite her. I have a puppy. Puppies nip and are playful and get overexcited all the time. Somebody should look up the breed of dog that this is. It's not an 85-pound pit bull, okay? This is a little bird dog. It's like a mid-sized sporting dog. The idea that this is a danger to people, any dog would go after chickens. It's a 14-month-old dog. And she could have given it away. Megyn, this is a true story. I have a friend who is an absolutely avid hunter, sportsman, everything else. He had, I think it was the same breed of dog. It looked very similar. was not a good bird dog at all. Just, he's like, it was untrainable. He loves his new bird dog so much he had it cloned, which is a whole other conversation. So he can have the same dog. So this guy's really into his bird dogs. This guy's really, you know what he did when he had a dog that he couldn't train? He said, I hired everybody. He found a single mom who was a family friend who had a little boy who wanted a dog. They love that dog. What is she doing? This whole thing about how she had to put the dog down, she had to go kill it. I don't know, maybe give it a day, maybe think about it. This dog had lived with her for 14 months, never bitten anybody before. One bite and she kills it. This is horrifying judgment in the act and horrifying judgment to tell the story. And I'm just going to say this. There are people who, unfortunately, and this always happens, if you ask anyone at the FBI, why aren't frauds reported more? You know why frauds aren't reported more? I mean monetary frauds. Because people are embarrassed that they were taken in by it. So the actual number of fraud that occurs, the monetary number, much bigger than what is officially reported, because nobody wants to say, oh yeah, like I sent the fake prince $10 million or, you know, whatever. They'd probably tell them that, but I sent them 50 grand. You know, nobody wants to admit this. Kristi Noem fooled a lot of people, and she fooled a lot of great people, people from rural America, people from South Dakota, people who believed in her. And I understand that there's this sense, look, I voted for Mitt Romney in 2012. Nobody's perfect, right? But let's look at reality and let's see what she has shown us, and let's make a conscious and real decision as Republicans to have some standards of truth and forthrightness and judgment in our politicians. I mean, that's basically where I come down on this.
Yes, I agree with all of that. I thought she was great too, I admit. And we really wrestled about whether we would even report the Corey Lewandowski news, because I really was her fan. But it was a big story. And my feeling was we would report this if it were about a man. If it were about somebody on the short list, you know, being considered for VP, we would report it. And we're not going to treat her differently just because she's a woman. So, and by the way, there are pictures and there's a lot behind that particular allegations. It's not one of those things that was just hurled. But there's a lot to digest in here, and I wanted to make a couple of comments as well. So she's upset because the dog scurried the birds around when there was no hunter nearby to shoot. He flushed up the birds, Cricket, out of range. Oh, dumbass dog who didn't understand exactly how Kristi Noem wanted it to hunt, even though it was just a puppy. And she, several times, the dog was having the time of her life. She talks about how she looked like she'd won the lottery. She was the picture of pure joy. I hated that dog. Why did she hate her? She hated the dog because she didn't hunt right on her first time out. The dog, by the way, had just been shocked. It's fine. I understand the shock collar. And she hated her because when the dog was killing chickens, which I'm convinced at least my Strudwick would do, and they see chicken the way we see chicken, like food. Like, they don't understand. Yes. You know, the modern niceties of how you're supposed to be around chickens, right? They say it's food, it's prey. And by the way, it's in the dog's nature. That's why you hire it to help on a hunt, to go retrieve the dog. I mean, retrieve the bird. Anyway, I'm sure my Strudwick would eat chickens if I put him around, and he's the sweetest lug that you'd ever find in your life. And she seemed, if you hear the audio, to take delight in it. She wants us to believe that it was a tough decision, because it would be a tough decision for anyone else. It would definitely be tough to decide to kill your innocent 14-year-old puppy. That is a tough one. But it shouldn't have, it wasn't for her, because she was motivated by anger, and she clearly hated her dog, and I would submit is not an animal lover in any way.
Absolutely. I mean, why didn't she include in this memoir, which is all an act of, let's be honest, political memoirs are an act of propaganda, which propaganda is not always bad, but this was meant to be a launch pad into true national politics, a vice presidential or cabinet role, and a future run at the presidency for her. Everybody knows it. It's obvious from her little spokesperson who's running around sharing polls all summer about how she's the VP that they fear most and all this kind of stuff. So this is not some theory. We all know what the game plan was here. She's writing this memoir. Why not say, I mean, did she cry? Did she cry after she had to shoot her own dog? Obviously not, because she hated the dog. So she shot the dog in anger. Is that the kind of decision that you make when you're in a bad mood? I'm going to go kill the family dog. It had lived with her for 14 months. By the way, depending on who you ask, puppies become adult dogs anywhere from 12 to 18 months. So this whole game that some of the Noem supporters play, it's not a puppy. I mean, it's basically a puppy. It's a puppy, okay? And if you're fighting about whether or not it's a puppy when you're talking about killing a dog under these circumstances, you're already losing. But I mean, it's interesting to see. I'll tell you, I got a lot of pushback on my show. You know, Clay is not. I have a dog. I grew up with dogs, and I love them. And maybe I have an irrational attachment to canines. I think
no, it's not irrational. My audience is totally with us. There are some who said, "All right, maybe," but they could see why this is controversial as well. I mean, the vast majority are with us.
Clay, you know, my co-host on our fabulous show, Clay tried to be he's not a dog guy, so he just took the perspective of, to share this story is such political malpractice that alone. I mean, to think that if you're going to win over suburban moms in Pennsylvania and
Which
Arizona,
is the only reason you're being considered, by the way, that's the only reason you're being considered as VP.
Correct. And the only thing here is to get married women voters in the suburbs to really go for Trump. Okay. That is your goal in life as VP. You had one job. And you're telling this story about, oh, yeah, on the ranch, we just handle the business ourselves. The whole thing, it was political malpractice. But Clay wasn't coming down on her as hard. I mean, I think it bothered him, but as hard on the shooting of the dog itself, because people say, well, she was doing the whole, it was a danger. And what about Old Yeller? I'm like, Old Yeller had rabies, everybody.
He had rabies. It was a mercy.
It was a mercy killing. Okay. No one's saying that when you and then people say, well, I put my dog down when it was 15. I'm like, yeah. It was a mercy after a long and wonderful life with your family. Everyone does. Why? I don't know, people, but there's such a desperation to defend her horrible conduct. I bring it up because with the North Korea thing, now it's fine. Now it's just people.
She lost Clay.
Now it's flat earther land. Now, if you don't see who we're dealing with here, do you know how many people have met? I mean, again, I worked in the CIA. I ran 2 presidential briefings. It was me, the president, running it for the CIA, vice president in the room. I have some idea of how this stuff goes. The number of people who have met with Kim Jong-un, who are American, who are senior level officials, I think you could count them maybe on 2 hands, maybe on 1. I mean, it is tiny. It would be.
And what you're saying is the governor of South Dakota is not on the list, Buck?
I mean, I think this is when she was a congresswoman too. I mean,
yes.
I haven't read the book yet, but I'm assuming you're a no-name congresswoman from South Dakota, and you think you're going to be like chilling out with Kim Jong-un and staring him down. It's fantasyland garbage. But the reason somebody could include that in a book like this is they're so used to just having the people who like her, and there are guys, and Megyn, I can't speak from this perspective. There are guys who they see, she's attractive. You know, I live in the real world. She's a good-looking woman, and they give her more than a little leeway because of it. I'm not saying
I object on this. This is exactly what pisses me off. Some people will accuse me sometimes of being too hard on my own sex. It's not that I'm too hard on my own sex. It's that I have very high standards for them, and I know they can meet them. I refuse to lower the bar for performance for my own sex. I know what we're capable of. We can be all the things. And her behavior, her stories about herself are as fake as her hair. It's gotten to the point where she's trying to glam herself up. She has to decide whether she wants to be a pinup girl who's like got the guns and is super tough, or she wants to be a leader who's smart and sober and could take this country into the next generation. She's ruined the second possibility with all of this nonsense. I see her entirely differently than I used to before. And the lying about it has made it even worse. I mean, in revising the dog story in the wake of the controversy, she's changed it to the dog had attacked people. Who? That's not what you said in your book. That would have been a detail you should have and would have included. All you said was the dog tried, but didn't, to bite you, not people, not a danger to your kids. And by the way, it was when you were trying to take a high value item out of its mouth, a dead chicken. Any animal would be reluctant to part with it. So she's lying even in the wake of it. And by the way, did you see the reports today? She wanted to include this dog story in her first book about Not My First Rodeo. That's what we had her on for in 21. And some smart advisors around her said, that would be very stupid. That's not going to have the effect you think it is. And apparently now she has a different team. I think it's fair to say that when we went on stage after the premiere of the first episode, Roseanne stole the show.
Yeah.
Do you agree with me?
I do.
She was so funny. She was doing this thing where she was laughing loud in her Roseanne laugh at the whole show, everybody's parts. And then when she got up there, she talked a bit about what it meant to her to come back this is her first animated series since the cancellation, first TV series really, since the cancellation of her show. Were you surprised at, how it still weighs on her?
I'll tell you one thing I've really learned from celebrities is you think maybe they're wired different than other folk, and maybe they don't see things or hang on to things, or they have so much money that it really doesn't, things sort of roll off of them because they land in this beautiful house with beautiful accoutrements and drive beautiful cars. Most celebrities I know hang on to stuff and have sort of just as much sort of rage, jealousy, animosity as anybody I've ever worked with on a construction site, and more. Like it's really weird. Like if you talk to Sylvester Stallone, you're not going to talk about all the victories. You're going to talk about some movie that was supposed to, you'll talk about Cobra or Driven or something, like one of his movies that didn't work that well. And then he'll go into this thing about we had a good script and the executives screwed it up and they gave us this crappy director. And I was like, okay, let's just talk about Rocky.
Yeah, right. Fine.
You know what I mean?
None of us is harboring that for you.
Right. Now but I think there is something in the achievers where every pro athlete I've ever, any big time pro successful athlete I've ever interviewed can tell you when they screwed up in the game in high school or when they screwed up in the game in college. Like it's baked into their mind. It's not the victories. They remember the losses, and they're really hard on themselves, and they really dwell on it. I mean, Roseanne's not hard on herself, but they're angry about the losses.
Yeah.
The woman who made $1 million an episode when she was the queen of sitcoms in 1991 dwells on the loss.
I look at her, I'm like, she's Roseanne. She's one of those people who by a first name. She's so gifted. She got completely ramroded by her fellow castmates, by ABC, by the executives and so on. And I think she must be past that, right? She's got to be past all that. It still burns her, and she's still really. And you think back to how they took that show away from her when it was she had brought it back, and they were number one again. And then, anyway, so good for you.
It's the cowardly castmates that drive me nuts in this equation.
Sarah Gilbert was the worst.
She's the worst.
The worst.
She's the worst.
But Hollywood, are they friends? I mean, like. You've been out here for a long time. Are they actually capable of being good friends? I don't know.
Sarah Gilbert is angry bitch. I hate her. I did her show, The Blab or The Talk or The Yak or whatever the hell they call it, and I don't know. She gave me some sort of 10-minute dissertation on what lesbians were or something. And I was like, oh, shut up, you shrew. Okay.
Speaking of sex lives, let's talk a little Stormy Daniels because, I don't know whether Mr. Birchum watches the news, but I think you'd have some strong opinions on the woman who took the stand yesterday in the Trump trial. Adam, she got up there, and I'm not gonna tell you about her walk into the courtroom and her taking of the stand. I'm gonna let our mutual friend Lawrence O'Donnell, not true, tell us both about his impressions of her walking into that courtroom. Watch this.
The excitement and anticipation in the room hit a new high at 10:32 a.m. She entered wearing all black, as if on her way to a funeral. The loose-fitting, plain black clothing draping from her shoulders to her toes suggested the modesty of a nun. The makeup was minimal, the way she and the other moms in her neighborhood might look when shopping at the local grocery store. The long blonde hair, held up with a clip at the back of her head, the way it might be in a utilitarian way while she was doing dishes or checking one of the horseshoes on her horse. She was alone in the room with him that first time. This time, there were over 100 people in the room, all watching her, except him.
Oh my God, the drama.
You know what I want to say to all these adults who are in the news industry? What did you go to journalism school for?
Yeah.
This is a Mexican soap opera. You're not a journalist, you idiot. Why did you do? What compelled you? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, was it to bust the lid off of stories like this?
Is it to just use nothing but hyperbole to essentially try to turn a zero burger into a double king cheese? You know, like, what are you doing? Like, where's your dignity? I feel this way about almost everybody in media these days. Why are you here? What are you doing? What compelled you to get into this business? What motivated you to get into business? What would your dad say, who paid for you to go to college and then journalism school, to see this sad sack on display?
No, it's so true. But they can't help themselves. This is their Super Bowl, their Oscars, you know, all of it wrapped into the World Series, wrapped into one. And this, plus when Michael Cohen takes a stand, this is the apex of their event. They wanted to hear her talk about Trump and how brief the sexual interlude was, because they want to see him humiliated. This is it.
Of course it's it. Michael Cohen is a spastic nut job.
Yes.
Who I interviewed on my podcast once, and in the almost 4,000 podcast episodes I've done, it was the only time I said to a guest, I am going to hang up if you do not reel it in. Like, if you cannot maintain yourself, I'm going to hang up. And I have a long fuse for nutty people. I
think the record will reflect.
The record will reflect. I started off with my family, went into my friends, went into, teaching boxing, working on a construction site, doing Loveline. I've known a lot of nut jobs and have given them a lot of leeway. Michael Cohen was literally the only person I've ever said, if you don't reel it in, because he was so agitated and kind of unprofessional and stupid, I said, I am going to hang up on you.
Wow.
It was a January 6th thing where I said, I think it was a riot, but I don't think it was an insurrection. And he started going insane.
What I'd really like to do, if you don't mind getting political, is speak with Joe Biden. We ran a clip of Mr. Trump, who's, in a different phase of life right now. Oh, here he is, Mr. President. Great to see you. How are you?
Hey, good to see you again, Megan Smelly. You're lovely. And not smelly. Come on, you're lovely. You're like a great lady to sniff. I want that to be clear.
I've got to ask you, Mr. President, the polls lately have been maybe a little better for you, but it's not looking great for you in these polls in the swing states. How do you turn that around?
Look, we got to get rid of this Donald Duck guy. Come on. All we have to do is talk about the real issues. For example, Mexican melts are coming over the border. Some as young as $1.99. and paragraph. New paragraph. Smile.
Now, are you having a prompter issue again, Mr. President? Seems like you might be reading your answers.
Look, all we have to do is we have to tell the people that I'm just don't worry about my age. Or we can just weaken at Bernie's this thing for the next 4 years. Smile.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like
new paragraph.
If anything happens to you? Do you feel like if anything happens to you, we can feel good about Kamala Harris ascending to the presidency?
No, that's what I'm saying. You don't have to worry about Kamala Harris. Everyone knows we can just weaken at Bernie's me. It's a fine piece of film. It's a wonderful movie. So if nothing else, I promise in my next term, at the very least, will be quite hilarious. Semicolon. The hijinks alone will be worthwhile. Triple exclamation point. End page. Next page.
What? Mr. President, I really wanted to ask you a question because recently on Cinco de Mayo, you had a big party and you brought out the margaritas in the Rose Garden and had a great time demanding that Congress or allow dreamers who have been model citizens, according to you, come into the country and vote. And that was very controversial. Did you drink those margaritas? Because you said some weird things that day.
Yeah, at Rose Garden, what was I doing? Why was I in the Rose Garden?
Well, you're the president, and that's your garden.
President? I would like to meet that man. I salute that guy. Da, 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 da.
Can I ask you, sir? I know this may be a little impudent, but you seem to get lost a lot when I see you in these videos, and you seem to have trouble with the stairs up Air Force One. I mean, if it's not your age, what is it we're seeing in those videos?
Which those are fake films that they'll take a perfectly good Joe Biden. I'll take my talkie pills, and I'll be doing just fine. Sometimes the stairs will come at you, and then they'll move that thing's on the conveyor belt. If you're familiar with the plane stairs.
Oh, got to look really closely, I guess, to see it. I have to ask you about your revisions to Title IX. I have to tell you, I'm very unhappy with you. You redefined the word woman. You now said that biological boys and men in K through 12 and college can go into the girls' locker rooms, into the girls' bathrooms. Why'd you do that?
That's right. Because it's the right thing to do. Whether it's a boy having vaginas or penis having girls, everyone deserves to go to the bathroom in the same place, and I'll stand by that. Smile at camera.
Would you want your daughter using such a bathroom with a biological man coming in?
Well, who's to say? My daughter could have a penis or a vagina or a penis. The worst thing you could do is tell a man that he has to have certain things. And there's a stall there. You close the door, man. Come on.
Well, the other thing you did in your Title IX revisions was you took away due process rights for young men on college campuses who get accused of sexual assault. And, it does occur to me, sir, respectfully, that if you held yourself to those same standards when Tara Reade accused you of a sexual assault, you might be behind bars.
Oh, come on. I just gave her a nice little sniff. That's all. It's the difference between a sniff and a sexual sniff. Big difference. Plus, you're assuming you're assuming I'm sorry. Come on, you know the thing. Get your face out of your ears, pal.
What do you Mr. President, sometimes you refer to the dead people as alive and the alive people as dead. That's happening more and more. What's like, do you not remember who's dead and alive?
Yeah, well, it's hard to, it's hard to remember sometimes who's a dead and who's an alive person. So I think what the best thing is what we can do as a nation is come together and just start all over. And if I say, here's the thing, it's better than a Donald Duck guy. That's the vote, man. All right? You guys got orange legs.
Before I let you go, I've got to let you respond to the criticism that was launched the way of your wife. At the top of this show, Adam Carolla came on and made a point I confess I've made myself in the past, sir, and that is that your wife has no business calling herself doctor, that she's not a real doctor. Care to respond?
Oh, she's a real doctor. She's a doctor of something, man, right? What are you saying? You could go to her, ask her. I go to her all the time. I say, Jill, what do I do with this? She'll say, get a Band-Aid or whatnot. And she's a doctor.
You think?
What do you think she is?
Oh, yeah. I think she's got something approaching a doctorate, but not an actual PhD in education.
Jill. Hey, you a doctor? Huh? What? Oh, you're right. She's not a doctor. I've never asked her that before.
You maybe should find a new doctor, sir, to look after your neurological health. Thank you so much for being here. That's a great honor to have you on the program. We appreciate it.